Bon, je vais continuer en français. Vous avez remarqué que je n'étais pas Charles.
You may have noticed I am not Charles Loprinzi. I will speak French, and so I will try and discuss neuropathy. It's a vast change from the previous theme. We can't be triumphant anymore. We are moving into an area that is much tougher, much more frustrating. Prevention of toxicity in connection with our various treatments. So chemo toxicity has been well established. This is something that we know really well. One such toxicity is particularly intractable. It bothers us sometimes for responding patients. We want to increase the treatment, and toxicity gets in the way. And we also saw in previous presentations that maybe toxicity will no longer be a challenge thanks to new therapies we can look forward to, but at least for a while, still, we'll have to manage this type of complications. So, Charles reminded us, as is his wont, that he has a number of conflicts of interest. This speaks to the value of his contribution to the medical world, so beware whatever we say. Everybody has conflicts of interest. Okay, all joking aside, Charles decided to give a presentation on the recent work done at ASCO. The guidelines on prevention of neurotoxicity as well as treatment thereof. And so this presentation is mostly based on the therapeutic aspect of things. On the prevention front, there is also a lot of frustration among us because most of the drugs that have already been used, and maybe we can discuss it during Q&A, have proved quite disappointing, even though from the point of view of neurophysiological mechanisms, there are lots of interesting leads we can follow, neuromediators in particular, but clinically speaking, the results are quite disappointing. So this presentation is an update. And this is a benchmark at a global level alongside other guidelines, other references. So as usual, the guidelines are based on a wealth of information, a wealth of abstracts and papers, 1,225 potentially relevant quotes. When we sort things out, we narrow it down to 250 articles or papers that were examined in detail following the selection process, and only 48 papers were deemed to be eligible for guideline evidentiary basis. And particularly for this type of subject, because the publications are often not controlled, not checked, and the various research teams look at different drugs, and we know that the neurotoxic potential may be very different. The neurotoxicity mechanism may not be exactly the same between oxaliplatin, carboplatin, etc. So these 48 studies made it possible to isolate 42 articles about prevention. We're not going to discuss that here. And there are 6 articles, 6 papers on treatment of neurotoxicity. So clearly, and we're not going to spend time on that. There are 2 drugs that were used up until now. These 2 drugs were identified by a number of studies as being very promising. Acetyl L-carnitine, which tweaks the NGF, and also lamotrigine. And clearly, in the various reviews, these products are not deemed as interesting for treating toxic neuropathies. These studies are extremely disappointing, even though the initial papers in 2012, particularly for acetyl L-carnitine, showed that in 90% of patients the result was good. I think Charles would have insisted on how difficult it is from a methodology point of view, how difficult it is to carry out these studies. So now that that's done, item number 2, the emergence of Duloxetine has been confirmed. It is an interesting drug for treating neurotoxicity. And there are a number of arguments being bandied about, as we will see later. There are other drugs, but I will get back to them later. Duloxetine. These are the studies that recommend the use of duloxetine for neurotoxicity. So this is a randomized trial. Publication dates back to 2013, and this phase 3 double-blind trial looked at neurotoxicity, chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathy. The design is quite conventional. We want to test the effective dose versus placebo over a 4-week period with a washout period of 2 weeks, which means that we then get to reverse the prescriptions. And in this area, non-measurable symptoms are key, and therefore the methodology is key, as you will see in the next 2 slides. In this slide, when we compare the 2 patient groups, duloxetine prescribed first or placebo prescribed first, you see that the pain level is reduced, barely significantly so, using duloxetine. Here we are at the very limit of significance. And for the placebo, as you can see, the reduction is also low. After the washout period, if we now switch to placebo first, a placebo second and duloxetine second, the difference is significant. Also, in terms of treating pain and other subjective symptoms, the prescribing order does matter. So in order to validate the result for this type of study, the results must be significant in both arms in order to avoid the so-called placebo-like effects connected with the prescribing order. This is something that we know really well. So as you can see, we have switched to a level of significance that is more significant, a higher level of significance. And as you can see, duloxetine is shown to be effective in this study. Again, this is a 4-week study. 4 weeks isn't a very long time. There's another paper that looked at the product as well as vitamin B12. This is a fundamental vitamin that plays a role in producing neuromediators and protecting myelin. So needless to say, the use of vitamin B12 is attractive, intellectually speaking, and this Japanese study was carried out on a limited number of cases. Clearly, this is a problem with all of these studies. Only 34 cases initially. So 5 patients dropped out due to adverse events, adverse effects, and there's still a significant difference in favor of duloxetine versus vitamin B12 in terms of numbness and also in terms of pain. So the study may be seen as being underpowered, but it goes in the same. It goes along the same lines. It goes in the same direction. So the molecule that the agent works, the benefits seem to be rather limited, barely significant, and toxicity may be a problem. We're fully aware of the harmful effects of antidepressants. Now, other drugs are recognized as being potentially effective. 3 of them here, gabapentin in particular. Historically, we have used it widely for this type of toxicity. Topical BAK. It's a gel that a mixture of ketamine, amitriptyline, and baclofen. 3 drugs whose mechanisms are different from each other, not used in France, unfortunately, but we can tell you more about that. And then, of course, tricyclic antidepressants, which are widely used in terms of neuromodulation, whether for treating pain or for treating this type of neurotoxicity. So gabapentin, there are various studies that were carried out. Again, historically speaking, studies were in favor of using gabapentin, and the very first study is a presentation of abstracts dating back to 2002 at ASCO. So this looked at the use of gabapentin for oxaliplatin-induced, so chemotherapy-induced neuropathy. So the patients received oxaliplatin They had neuropathy, so this is how the study was carried out. We introduced oxaliplatin while introducing increasing doses. And even though the paper was never produced, the findings said that at the end of the day, it is possible to use oxaliplatin to the tune of 14 cycles while preventing neurotoxicity, while treating neurotoxicity using gabapentin. In 2006, two studies came out, two cohorts of patients also treated with oxaliplatin for metastatic colorectal cancer. And here we apply gabapentin at higher doses, 300 milligram up to 600 milligram, and we find that in both arms, contrary to the previous study, there is no significant difference in terms of prevention or in terms of neurotoxicity prevention or treatment. A third paper in 2009, published by a Czech team. Here they used pregabalin in 30 children. There's a variety of different neurotoxic products, and the study shows that pain is reduced on the visual analog scale, so reduced by 59%, and the result is maintained for 86 in 86% of cases. You may be skeptical when it comes to these significant findings. In 2010, there was another report looking at 23 patients treated with oxaliplatin, and the response may be as high as 40%. So safety was rather good as well. 5 studies here, 5 Japanese studies recalled here, and the results are rather favorable. Looking at pregabalin to prevent neurotoxicity induced by paclitaxel. Oxaliplatin, here we're introducing 2 different drugs, which raises a problem in terms of evaluation. And after a while, at the end of the day, a phase 3 comparative trial comes into play, and we're going to try and sort out this long series of studies which pretty much tend to favor the use of pregabalin. So this is a placebo trial, same model as for Duloxetine, and the result, as you can see, is on a par with our doubts. In this randomized placebo-controlled study, the results are very different than what we find in non-controlled studies, and this shows what challenge we're up against. We need to stick to randomized trials, either placebo-controlled or controlled studies. It all depends on the methodology we choose. So, as we can see, pregabalin is used to treat neuropathy, but this poses problems. We're now disappointed with the use of this drug, and even though pregabalin has been identified as a potential treatment for neuropathy-related pain and prevention of neuropathy, we do not think that pregabalin can go much further. Here's another study reported here by Charles. Same lines here. I think he was simply hammering the nail home. The number of patients treated is very low when you think about it, and these are the situations that we find. Effectiveness is rather limited. Now, long-term follow-up should comfort us. The initial results aren't as exciting as we thought initially, so I'm sure that Charles is going to want to say a few words about that. I didn't find any slides on it. There is one study that was carried out, 208 patients, and this study seems to show interesting results. But Richard will tell us more about it later. The product was approved in the U.S., but we have just one study on 208 patients, so we can wonder whether it makes sense to grant marketing approval for this product. There are other products available in France, as you well know. We can discuss them later. Capsaicin in particular, which is also a very interesting avenue. Now, tricyclic antidepressants. Here we have a lot of literature, a lot of interesting literature. So these antidepressants, despite the side effects, are potentially usable. But here we are at the juncture between evidence-based medicine and expert-based medicine. I think we still have our work cut out for us. To wrap up, Charles was suggesting looking at other practices. Are you familiar with scramble therapy? It's about masking. It's about scrambling pain signals.
Dans le monde de la douleur, qui sont les thérapies de stimulation transcutanée, avec des appareils qui vont être...
It is a transcutaneous system, a transcutaneous simulation system that we use to mask and drown out pain signals. It is a gate control theory, but much more complicated than that. We're going to inhibit nociceptive messages and drown out the pain. And this is what you do when you rub your hand when it hurts, and after a while the burning sensation goes away. So this is a therapeutic method which is very much used as a painkiller, and that's a method worth exploring to treat neuropathies. But it requires equipment, regular sessions, and the idea is to saturate the spine and the brain with non-pain messages so as to drown out the pain. So 14 different trials here have been reported here, and 12 papers have been published. 2 abstracts have been published, and all of these look at the outcome of such neurostimulation therapy, and these are the various studies. Some of these studies have been randomized. So the pilot study here by Thomas, and it shows that in this non-controlled trial, the pain level is reduced significantly after 30 minutes of stimulation. Gradually, over time, and after 10 days, as you can see, the reduction in pain is significant. So the idea, of course, is to continue with the studies. So clearly, there was a study at the Mayo Clinic using this neurostimulation technique. Patients had toxic neuropathy for over a month, and the pain level exceeded 4 out of 10. That's the conventional pain level. And treatment was applied for a duration of 10 days, so 30 minutes of stimulation every day. So 37 patients were enrolled in the study, 25 were treated primarily in their lower limbs, and 12 were treated on their upper limbs. I guess it all depends on where the neurotoxicity is located. And in this study, we find that the impact on various symptoms is favorable: pain, tingling, numbness, which are significantly reduced. And this deserves further exploration. Now, I'm not going to comment all of these figures. I can't possibly do it as well as Charles would, but the pain level is reduced significantly. As you can see, the percentages here. The results look quite promising, and pain appears to be pretty much under control after 10 days. So the symptoms seem to be pretty much under control after 10 days. And if we look at the second to last line, average pain reduction 53%, which is significant. It's probably the best result for all of the drugs that have ever been used. As you know, whether controlled or not controlled, in trials, the patient's opinion, or rather the patient's life, is key. And so when we ask the patient whether under different circumstances he would have advised this treatment to other patients, the vast majority, 83% of patients said yes. So that's an argument in favor of exploring these methods further. Again, these methods are not revolutionary, and so my presentation feels, well, the previous presentation was a tough act to follow. I feel seriously underdressed. So conclusion, in terms of ASCO guidelines, yes, Duloxetine works. It is the drug we can use. It's well tolerated, and you need to start with rather low doses, and then you escalate the dose. Safety is better than rate of action or speed of action, and so yes, I use it, and yes, I recommend it. Gabapentin is commonly used for many neuropathies, but we consider that the data in the literature is extremely limited. Charles does not use this molecule, this agent, but many practitioners do. Now, tricyclic antidepressants. The data is rather old. I disagree a little with the statement according to which there's a lack of data, because in other non-chemotherapy related pains, it's actually been recommended that antidepressants be used for managing pain, at least in French-speaking countries. But Charles doesn't use tricyclic antidepressants, but a few others do. So for this type of agent, the interest of antidepressants for chronic pain, particularly low-noise depressive symptoms, this can be an argument for the patient, for patients who show the twofold symptoms. So using antidepressants may be a good idea. So topically, now topical agents can be used, and Charles confirmed that we need to continue with our evaluation of this combination of baclofen, amitriptyline, and ketamine. The modes of action are different. Baclofen, GABAergic, amitriptyline is an anti-serotonergic, and ketamine is a different story. So those are anti-opioid systems, and they facilitate recapture of serotonin. Serotonin is the neuromediator involved in pain processes. So with regard to scrambler therapy, we consider there are two studies here. Well, it's not proof of concept per se, but they're still interesting. So if Charles puts on his scientific hat, he believes that no arguments. But we're all human beings. From a clinical point of view and from a scientific point of view, if you put both hats on at the same time, the results are interesting. And until we get something better, until we find the right ad hoc drugs, I believe we need to use a kitchen sink approach. And over time, these systems will prove their efficacy in treating neurotoxicity induced by chemotherapy. And this is what our patients want by definition. And so, and Charles says, let's meet him in Adelaide. So many thanks.